this guy is working on Wall Street when he should be working for one of you.
Things like, they're like, what are you, nuts?
Right.
So
I got a lot of that. Like this spotlight comes out and like shines on me, and I'm like, yeah, I'm here. Leadership is about vision plus implementation. So same kind of thing.
welcome to Keep Hustling, where we are going past the why to get to the how. I'm your host, the always hustling Aaron Gordon, aka NY Risk Advisor, aka Mr. #Keep Hustling. In this podcast, we will be diving deep into the professional and personal successes of our guests to find out how they hustled through the most difficult times in their life and their development to achieve the success they've gotten to today. So buckle up for what hopes to be an amazing ride. And of course, now and always, keep hustling. Welcome to Keep Hustling with my guest, Rabbi Dr. Joshua Joseph.
Can we go with Josh?
Josh. Thanks for being here, Josh.
You got it.
Did I get the right initial introduction? Then we'll just go with Josh.
You got all the titles.
I left off the most important title, my good friend and mentor, Josh. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being in studio.
I am so happy to be here. Took a little while.
You know what?
But
you got to keep hustling.
You got it. I wanted to see if you could prove this title right
That's
here.
It. Your story, which I know we're going to get into, is one of evolution, hustle, grit, twists, turns. You'll probably say you're in the middle chapters, would be my guess.
For 100%.
100%. I mean, of the twists and turns. Like, you're not even cool with stability.
I don't know what I want to be when I grow up.
That's it. Where does that come from? That ability to accept the twists and turns, embrace the twists and turns, and hustle through them to the next level of the success?
Well, I want to say, thank you. Good, nice compliments. Part of it is like being a middle child, right? A little bit, you don't know.
I do know. I know exactly.
Yeah.
This is where we are.
Well, but it's also like my dad was a rabbi in a Sephardi shul, Spanish and Portuguese synagogue, right? But we were like Ashkenazi. So I was like, okay, I was different. And then we were a little bit more religious, and I went to like a less religious school. And then, my sister's the oldest, so I'm, sort of younger, but then I'm the oldest of the boys. So I was always like two different things. I was always multiple things. And so I held my hypocrisy as well. Like I could be one thing and another at the same time. So I was okay with flexibility. I was okay with change.
You said hypocrisies and flexibility.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that, being okay with hypocrisies? Because I think people often, when they feel that internal hypocrisy, they think it's a bad thing. And obviously there are bad hypocrisies.
Yeah, sure.
But people run from those moments when really they should be running to those moments.
Well, I mean, I don't think people should actively be hypocritical and say, like, you should do this and I'm going to go do something different. But I do think that sometimes it's okay, certainly when we're growing and when we're curious, to say, okay, I'm here. I'm going to try that also. Or I'm going to be, sometimes that thing is going to happen, and I'm going to be accepting of the circumstance. One of my rabbis, Rav Ezra Bick from the Gush, used to give a Dvar Torah, I don't know if he does it anymore, about the value of hypocrisy. And he talked about Avraham Avinu, who was just a certain kind of way, but he tried to extend and go beyond, and there's something hypocritical about that, right? So like everybody was a certain way, right? Believed in
and he was that way, by the way. He was that way.
And he's like, I think there's one. I'm gonna act that way. I'm gonna smash some idols or whatever, right? So like, I don't know if that's exactly hypocrisy, but it's being able to handle multiple truths, right? Being able to handle multiple realities at the same time.
But does that mean that you have to, that's part of seeking one truth and just realizing that part of that growth is at some points there's that duality to get to it, or saying life is about that tension?
So I'm at a point right now where my rabbi, Rabbi Yossi Zakatinsky, explains the inner strength, the pnimius, based on Kabbalah, based on metaphysics, based on Chassidus, that there is a storyline underneath that brings it all together. And so I'm of the mindset right now that there is one thing, but that one thing can be manifest in two different ways at two different times for two different people through two different experiences or more.
And that's life. And I think that that's what I was getting at, is that, yes, there might be that one, but the way we get to that truth is often through varying mediums and the jobs of people. The whole reason why I started embracing the whole keep hustling was saying the learning, the driving, the growing personally and professionally is never at the end. Meaning, I would guess that what you're getting at is that a person at the end of the day, as my father, Yeshiva rest in peace, used to say, when they get to that last moment, they put the head on the pillow. Maybe that's the moment that they want to experience that oneness that's come together,
Sure.
that ultimate truth. But the rest of life leading up to that, it's the winds of getting there, and you have to keep hustling through that to get to that ultimate truth and success.
Yeah, look, I mean, the other thing is that I guess I'm getting older now, and I can't remember lies or half-truths or, Julie says, my wife's Julie says that I'm a good storyteller, and all good storytellers play on the edges of truth. But, I try to just say what I feel, and sometimes I feel different kinds of things. And so, again, two can actually be one. I'm looking at you.
Oh, here we go. Lay it on. Go, Josh.
And I just came from looking at somebody who looks like you, and
Sounds like me.
You sounds like you.
I'm glad that you say that I don't look like him and that
No.
I don't sound like him, because that 4 minutes was very valuable to me.
They are two. You are two. And yet there's a similarity. So does that make you one? Is that one thing? No, there's different manifestations, right? And that you're the older by 4 minutes?
That's right. The line that I've come to use, which I think Daniel even appreciates, is I had 4 minutes of peace in the world because I didn't even have peace in utero.
That's pretty good.
It is what it is.
Yeah. So
He had no peace.
He had no peace. He's never.
Well, I guess the 4 minutes that he was that he stuck
He was
behind. He
in
wishes
there.
he would have stayed there
Right.
longer,
Oh,
because that was bliss.
nice.
You made a decision in your career,
Couple of them.
a couple of big decisions,
Yeah.
but I think what I would say was probably the biggest, correct me if I'm wrong, was taking your life from for-profit to not-for-profit, or from, I don't mean that, and I don't mean that you don't deserve to earn a living just like everyone else.
It's actually accurate that, I don't, it wasn't the IRS, it was New York State came after me the year after, came after me. They audited me the year after I left my job on Wall Street, because I went from a K-1 to a W-2, and, the W-2 was significantly different than the K-1.
How old are you?
You're talking 20-something years ago.
So,
yeah.
So
It was early 30s.
It wasn't like
30
a retirement decision.
30
It was
years old.
like,
yeah.
you're supposed to go in
30
the
years
other
old,
direction, dude.
And like the last few years, you're just, showing a K1 and had some zeros on it and things like that. The good kind of zeros, I guess. And they came at me, and I was pretty good at saving receipts and everything like that. And at the end of the process, like the guy I remember was like, we might owe you a little more money, and also I'm sorry.
Really?
Like not like
Yeah,
I'm
no,
sorry,
I understand, like you're right. I get exactly what you're saying.
Right.
But when you made that decision, there had to be the traditional hustle is about careers.
Yeah.
And the way people view hustle is career, money, wealth, material comfort, and things like that. For someone not who starts out their career and decides that this is the trajectory that they want, even though they realize that if they go the not-for-profit route or the social justice or whatever other government route you want to say, that they'll forego over their lifetime some dollars and cents.
Right.
It is so rare for someone to find a cause or a calling that may change, and to literally have a tax return that reflects that from 1 year to the next in the negative.
Right.
Financially. Can you take us back to that moment of that decision to, I'm guessing, follow your heart over the traditional career path?
I mean, I appreciate that, and you've made it sound like more of a moment. I'm still in that moment of figuring out who I am and what I want to be and what do I want to accomplish in my life. I'm constantly thinking about it. I love the management books, the self-help books, which, the Nitziv calls Sefer Dvarim, the best, like
the self-help, right? Exactly.
book, because it's amazing, in terms of Musar and figuring yourself out. And Yeshua used to carry it around, and Malachim used to have Mishnah Torah with them. So, these go back a long way. But, when I graduated college, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And I had a job lined up, and then I made a decision, thanks to God, to go study in Israel. And I was going on a path, and I met a woman who I'm now married to, and I was like, okay, I guess if I have to go back to New York, I'll study to be a rabbi. I don't know if I want to be a rabbi. And so I was playing one on TV kind of thing, and I was like, I don't really like this stuff. So I went the other direction, and there was trading and research and working on Wall Street, running a hedge fund. And, I was talking with one of my mentors, Frank Luntz, Republican pollster. I knew him when I was in college. He was the one who found Ross Perot. He was a big, third-party candidate in the early 90s. And I was talking with him. He was doing some work in the Jewish community. I'm like, oh, that's interesting, because mostly his polling was political. And he's like, yeah, I was talking about what I'm doing. He's like, you're working on Wall Street? All right, that's interesting. And he was presenting at the conference of presidents of major Jewish organizations on Wall Street. He's like, why don't you come? I'm like, okay, that sounds interesting. Whatever. There was a room full of people. Lights go down. I snuck in the back. And he gets up and he's like, is Josh here? Not talking to me. I was a last minute invite, whatever. Is Josh Joseph in the room? I sort of wave, and I remember it was kind of dark. I feel like a spotlight, in my memory,
the ground should open and swallow me. And the ground should open and swallow me.
But this spotlight comes out and shines on me, and I'm like, yeah, I'm here. He's like, all right, Josh, stand up. And he goes to all the presidents and all the people, and this guy is working on Wall Street when he should be working for one of you. If he walks out of here and he's still not working for you, that's your fault. And I walked out of there with 9 business cards that day. And, it got me thinking about a lot of stuff. And I had some interesting conversations. And it led, one way or another, to me making a decision that I maybe had overcorrected, right? Yeah, okay, so I didn't want to be the rabbi of a synagogue. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I wanted to be working on Wall Street my whole life. Is there somewhere in between? And so, social service, nonprofit, whatever you want to call it, leadership, executive, management, looked like it could be something interesting. And there's all kinds of stories about twists and turns about how I ended up. I met another guy as I was walking in for my first day, my final interview for another not-for-profit. I was the morning show, and the afternoon show was a guy named Richard Joel, who was about to become, or had just become president of Yeshiva University. And we're sitting there because they were deciding on whether I was going to be the next executive. And he's like, we were schmoozing for 10, 15 minutes. He goes, so when are you going to come working for me? I said, you just met me. He says, yeah, I know talent. Meanwhile, he tells me afterwards he thought I was my brother. But that's another story.
See, so it happens to both of us.
Yeah,
it just doesn't just happen to me.
That's right.
Welcome to my life.
Yeah. But anyway, I'm like, well, I think this is going to be my first day on the job here, so why don't we just stay in touch? And
not a great look for me to just leave with you.
Whatever. But we stayed in touch and developed a relationship, and he ended up bringing me on as his deputy and chief of staff, and led to career 16 years plus at Yeshiva University.
What do you think they saw in you, the two of them? Because I assume that many other people could have been invited to that conference. Mm. There were other people in the room who could have been called out at that moment.
Yeah.
And I know, and maybe he'll come on the podcast one day, that President Joel meets people and reads people very well and very often. And especially, I assume, in his early days at YU. What do you think they saw that said, this person should evolve themselves into a leader of the Jewish people?
Well, clearly he thought I was my brother, so that I don't know if that counts, right?
But he called you later.
Yeah, he called me back. I think that there's dreamers and there's doers, right? There's people who can get passionate about a cause. I've seen you get passionate about something once or twice in my life, right? And they can express it, and they can communicate about it, and they can share a vision for what could be, right? And they care about values, and they care about, character traits and midos and doing right and doing good. And there's also people who can make stuff happen, right? So in terms of EOS, right, the entrepreneurial operating system, they think about it as visionaries and implementers.
Implementers, yeah.
Okay. And integrators, actually, is the term. Integrators, sorry, not implementers. There's visionaries and integrators. The integrator puts everything.
Right.
Okay. So Richard Joel used to talk about leadership is about vision plus implementation. So same kind of thing. And I think that both of them saw me as this sort of passionate feeling, having my values in the right place, whatever that means, or like I'm really feeling it, but also willing to like roll up my sleeves and do whatever it takes to figure it out and get it done. And Gino Wickman in one of his books, I think Rocket Fuel, talks about the fact that the visionary gene you can find in 35% of leaders. The implementation gene you can find in 5.5% of leaders. But how many people can you find it both in? Find both of them, right? And so I don't know if that's what it was, but given my history, it seems like either they saw it or based on experience that I was able to live in both of those worlds and work in both of those worlds. That's what I'd like to think. But you know what I think it really was? I think they just saw a nice guy who's trying to do good and who could help people.
But do you think that they felt that you were... it's just fascinating to me because it's a leap of faith on both sides. And to convince someone to leave Wall Street for the social service side is a lot of people would say, what are you, nuts? I have a wife and children and things like that. Like, what are you, nuts?
Right.
So
I got a lot of that.
I can imagine.
Right.
I've heard that. I've seen that movie before.
Yes.
So I'm guessing that there had to be something where it was also realizing that that's probably what you wanted, even if you weren't saying that. And I think the reason why I'm pressing that point is a lot of times people are scared to chase that dream or chase where their hustle will be best utilized because they worry about the reactions or they worry about what the status quo should be. And I've said many times on the podcast, I'm not talking about things that are illegal. I'm not talking about passions that are not irresponsible. But a lot of times people are scared because they say, this is the path that I was supposed to take. I went to university. I was supposed to start this job and climb up the corporate ladder. But I'm really passionate about this, which makes financial sense. I'm not going to be, begging for money on the street with this. I have to be a responsible husband, wife, parent, whatever. But then they can't take that jump until somebody looks at them and says, you can do it, and I believe in you, and this is really your calling.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, my first job after college was kind of cool. I was supposed to work at a place called Stats Inc., which was run by a guy named Bill James, who invented sabermetrics. And in baseball and in hockey, he was starting up hockey at that point, and I was supposed to do statistics in sports, which is kind of cool and kind of fun. And looking back on, the whole Moneyball thing and everything like that, I don't know if I have regret about it, but it could have been.
But you could have ended up with the Oakland A's, so just think about it.
True. It could have been kind of cool.
Plus, you're Canadian, so what do you know about baseball?
But I think you have to listen to your heart and stay open to opportunities in life. And I still do. Try to listen to my heart. Like, am I aligned? How am I feeling? Is my emotional intelligence telling me in my gut, in my chest, wherever you feel it, okay? Is it telling you that you're doing the right things? Or is there something tingling, bothering you, like you're not aligned? You're out of alignment with who you are, who you feel you are in terms of what you're doing. And I've felt that way, you know. For a long time, I was at YU for a long time, right? I felt I was exactly where I needed to be. And then I started feeling that itch. But I had a good boss, I had a good mentor, and he saw it, or he felt it. So he said, well, I'm adding this to your plate, or I'm promoting you to this position, or I'm going to send you for a doctorate, or whatever it was, to give me more opportunities to keep growing and to keep doing things, right? So, you know, you got to see what's that drive and motivation. I want to be what? Why? Right? So self-awareness, self-assessment is key. But also, it helps to be connected. You know, it helps to have mentors, helps to have an amazing wife. It helps to have, right, parents and siblings and kids and friends who you can talk with about this stuff. But at the end of the day, if you're feeling this cycling motion, right, that's going on and on, you're like, what is going on? Then there's something out of alignment.
That means you should reevaluate. That doesn't necessarily mean that what you're doing right now is wrong.
Correct.
But that means you should think about it. That's not.
What's bugging you?
Don't just
Right.
brush it aside.
And then you might find, well, I really think I should be the number one. Oh yeah, why?
Is that ego, or is that the
ego,
real itch?
or is like you really want to do it, you really want to lead, and you don't have the opportunity? No, bro. It's about ego. You just want somebody to pat you on the back. Very nice. Okay, very nice. So get a pat on the back. You don't need to be number one, because think about what you're going to be doing when you're number one. It's a different job. Or no, I actually really want to be number one because I have ideas that I want to make manifest, and like I want to be able to put things into action. And I think when I was working on Wall Street, there's the thrill, right, of the good days. And I remember just one story, like I made a call on a deal, and it was supposed to close Friday at 4:00, and it got held because it was a half stock and half cash deal. And they weren't sure what the percentage of the stock would be and this, that, the other thing. And it matters for how we put the deal into play in terms of the trade. You know, you could either make money or you could lose money. And Shabbos was early. It was the middle of the winter. And I went through Shabbos, and I was not in a good place. And, you know, I had a couple of chaims, maybe a couple too many. And like I was not present for Shabbos or for my family or for anything. And Shabbos ended, pretty sure by some calendar it had ended. And I ran, you know, check on the computer. It was pre like smartphone days, and
Did the dial-up thing.
Something like that, the modem. And it actually turned out like we made a good amount of money. Like it worked out in our favor. But I was like, I don't ever want to feel that way for 25 hours again in my life. Like, it was painful, you know? So I just like, okay, there's something there. You know, it's an earlier story that my son was a couple years old, and he was a little bit, he didn't talk right away. You know, he didn't talk at 10 months like some kids. But I came home one day, and he said a word that I was like, I turned to Julie. I was like, where did you get that word from? And she's like, haha, very funny, I wonder. And she pointed out to me that the language that they speak on Wall Street and trading floors isn't necessarily English. So someone gave me a suggestion. Take a jar. And every time you hear yourself say a word, put a little tzedakah in there, put a charity in there, a curse jar. And so they would always call me rabbi anyway.
So now you're the rabbi with the jar.
And now I was the rabbi with the jar. Everybody's making fun of me. And there was one day I lost a lot of money on a trade. And when I've told the story before, I told it was like $1 million. I don't think it was actually $1 million. It felt like $1 million, but it was big. And like there's this long trading floors, and you know the screens, and the guy next to me has 8 screens, and this one has 5 screens, and like you know whatever it is, and like these long rows, and it's very loud, and people talking and stuff like that. There's one office in the corner. Boss's office opens. I'm like, oh boy. Like I didn't have a box, but if I had a box, I would start packing things
exactly.
up. And you could see the smoke coming out of his ears, right? And he's walking. And I'm packing things into my bag, and I'm like, this is not good. And I'm sort of mid-packing, and he walks down, and now it gets quiet. Right? And everybody's hanging up the phone, and everybody's like, what's going on? Like,
Boss just exited.
Boss is walking.
I've seen this movie too
walking
before.
towards me, and I'm sort of looking down and like looking like this, and he starts into me and starts ripping into words like I had never heard before.
Here's the jar, dude.
Words I had never heard before, and he's like, this and the spit on. I'm a bit of a germy, and the spit. I remember I could still feel the spittle on my face, and like whatever. And I'm just like taking it and whatever. And he takes his hand in the mid sentence, and he reaches out, and he sees the curse jar. He takes out his wallet, peels off $100 bill, sticks it in my face, and goes, now don't do that again. He turns around, walks back into his office. Next day, every single person in the entire floor had a curse jar.
Wow.
So not the next day. I waited until I had some better trades on.
Exactly right.
Had some better trades on, and then I went to see him.
You ducked him for a little while.
I was like, so how come you just didn't fire me? He's like, are you kidding me? I just paid you a lot of money to learn a lesson. I'm going to let some other guy benefit from that. And it's not a reason that I left. It's an interesting story, right? Like that you can, even amidst all of that, learn some important lessons and maybe have positive influence on people so that maybe they don't curse and things like that. But all of these stories weighed in on, is this the world in this environment where I feel I am the best me that I want to be?
That doesn't mean that everyone, that's not, that for some people that's not the best environment.
No, like some of the people I was working with, like they went out and made a lot of money and were able to retire pretty much early and do a lot of good with the charity that they give and the things that they're involved in, and sit on opposite sides of the table now for me in doing amazing stuff. So, that was,
and for them, the environment didn't negatively impact them.
Exactly. I was just very sensitive, to like the stuff, and it had that kind of impact on me. So you got to know yourself, right? That's like the most important thing that you can try to figure out.
But I think you have to know yourself, but you also have to have the confidence to realize, even if it's not the confidence in yourself, but in the confidence in God and Hashem, or in just, I don't want to say humanity, but in the way that the world operates, that if you're doing the right thing, my father used to say, and I end every episode with, you do well by doing good. And if you're doing the right thing for yourself and you're hustling the right way for you, then you'll be in the best place for yourself.
Right. And if you are doing that, if you are manifesting your best self, like imagine, whatever, I say a lot of divrei Torah, but like, there's this concept of that Bnei Yisrael, when they get to Har Sinai, Vayichan Sham, and it encamped there, not they encamped there, right? And Chazal say, Ke'ish echad b'lev echad, like one person with one heart. Beautiful, achdus, the whole thing. Rav Meyer Morgenstern explains, yes, and that each person brought their own personal best manifestation to that moment. And if you didn't show up, then it wasn't full. And if you were trying to be somebody else's best, you also weren't full. And we each have to bring our best selves forward in order to bring about a redeemed world.
Just because you dropped Victor Meyer, I'll drop
Let's go.
Because I can't let you get away with all the books. One of my favorite books that I was actually, I don't remember who gave it to me when I was in college. It was not required reading. It was A Letter and a Scroll by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. He should rest in peace. And the concept is similar, that every person has value.
Right.
And I think that there's something there, that if there is a lifelong journey and a lifelong hustle, it should be to find that path or that value or that one screw in the building of the world that a person was put on this earth to accomplish.
Sir Dr. Ken Robinson, alav shalom, wrote a book called The Element. Okay, and the summary of the book is that every educator's job at every level is to help their student to find where their passions lie and where their talents are and the point at which those two meet. That is your element. And when you can figure out your element, you're whole. You're there. Game, set, and match.
You've achieved the hustle.
You've achieved the hustle. And then it's not work. It's life. And life is hard. Life is a hustle. I love this notion of keep on, because some days, like, I don't want to embarrass anybody, but like people ask me all the time, do you love your job? I love my job. I really do.
As long as you don't get into your running habits, because then you're going to embarrass me. We're not doing that. We're not doing it. We're running out of time here, Rabbi Joseph. For Josh, we're running out of time.
Right, but it's hard. I feel like I want the promotion and I want the title and I want the salary. Really?
We just discussed your travel schedule.
Do you know what comes with that? Do you know what comes with that? It's hard. You're making hard decisions back to back. It's not just the quantity of meetings and engagements and conversations, the intensity, right, of each one of them. You got to be in like mental shape. You got to be in emotional shape. You got to be in physical shape, I think, in order to be able to handle it sometimes. And you got to keep hustling. And you got to keep moving. And like platitudes, but you got to keep failing and own the failures. Oh, you talked about owning the limitations, right? That's the whole concept of bitul, right? The whole concept of bitul is I'm not like the more I figure out, the more I realize like.
But I keep going. But I keep
going. Right? I'm not bitul and therefore stop. I'm bitul and therefore I see the distance, but the opportunity for closeness with God. And so I'm going to keep going. I'm just going to keep doing it. I'm going to try something new. I'm going to be maybe a little hypocritical to what I was before or what I said before. I'm going to change my mind because I keep trying. I keep trying to move forward.
We're about to get to the end of the episode where I ask our guests to leave us with their favorite inspirational motivational quote. But because I don't know if you remember when we met.
Florida.
Great golf game. Remember basketball, great golf, bananagrams, the whole deal.
Yeah. Oatmeal in the shampoo.
Yes. No, it was in the soap bars. But
soap bars, okay.
For a different time. You asked, I believe that I, as being your mentee, OU, you had one request when you came.
Yeah,
we sat down, and I've never done this before, so I'm a little nervous.
Yeah.
But you said you wanted to flip the tables and ask me a question or two, so I'm about to leave my comfort zone and switch seats and keep hustling.
I'd like you to tell us, when was the hardest time in your life that you had to be quiet?
First of all, you know that's... I'm stalling just for a second. Have you ever asked my brother that question?
No.
Okay, we're going to get him on and we're going to ask him that question.
Okay, let's ask him.
Anyone who knows my brother and I know that is a...
Doesn't mean you were completely successful, but the hardest time, when you knew.
I know exactly when it was. There's two. I can't believe I let you do this. You and the listeners know that the single greatest influence on my life was my father.
Right.
Alav Shalom. My mother's a very close second, but
David Herschel ben Fega was his
David Herschel ben Zev.
Zev.
Was my
Sham Shadav and Leah.
Amen. The moment that I realized that there was nothing we could do to help him.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because the reason why I was struggling to find the answer is because at a certain point, it was the easiest time to be quiet.
Mm-hmm.
In that I believed that the doctors were doing their best.
Right.
I remember where I was. I can smell the room. I remember where I was sitting. I remember how my brothers and my mother and I were sitting. I remember exactly the conversation. And at a certain point, you want to yell at these people and call them a bunch of idiots.
Right.
Because it's impossible. It's impossible. It's impossible. My father
You can't die.
My father, who has given so much and been through so much and lived on the streets and built everything, can't swallow, and that's with this and that, and like
Right.
all the rest of the details. None of it. It's impossible. So you want to like scream, but yet you have to be quiet. And I think, yeah, I mean, it was.
Yeah.
Also, I think that it's going to sound cliche, but there's nothing you could say at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And usually I would probably just make a joke or say something
Right.
stupid. But I guess God was good to me and my mother, especially at that moment, for me not doing that. I was with my father when he passed away.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't difficult to be silent. That was not the answer to your question.
Right.
It was hard. It was hard
Yeah.
to accept. My name is Aaron, so by Yidom Aaron.
Yeah.
And Aaron was silent, but
Do you think it was hard for Aaron to be silent then too?
of course, I assume so.
Absolutely.
Yeah, of course. I don't,
Absolutely.
and obviously, that experience. I think that in life, the things that are sometimes the hardest to accept are the easiest to accept. I think that if a person really has faith, when faith is tested most, if it comes through, it's the easiest to be silent.
Yeah.
Meaning, yeah, it was difficult for Aaron in the Bible.
Yeah.
It was difficult for me. But at the same time, our goal as people of faith, you mentioned bitul, but it's that, but more, is to give up that control.
Yeah.
Is to realize that we're not the puppet masters. Yes, we have free will, and yes, there's those things, but the happiest person is the person who realizes, that a person that gives over their worries or their burdens to God is the freest person. And I think those moments are, extremely clear.
Yeah. I think that I don't have that same problem of trying to hold back. I maybe the opposite.
That was a
direction.
very good question, Josh.
Okay.
Thank you for. My wife is certainly going to appreciate the
Okay.
question.
Good. But I do know that there are people with other genes who have a lot to say. And I think it's kind of unique. Someone like you who has a lot to say, a lot of stuff to value, of value to say. You have what to share. And yet here you are running a podcast asking other people to talk and share. And I think that you're actually manifesting something by doing that, about, having the ability to hold yourself back and make space, literally make this nice little space here to allow other people into your life, into other people's lives to be able to share. So I just wanted to point out that I appreciate your inviting me, but I appreciate your creating this moment, this opportunity.
I'm learning a lot, so it's a lot of selfishness. So I'm learning a lot from
That's
our
good
guests.
too.
I appreciate it.
That's good too.
Josh,
Yes.
I asked our guests to leave us with their favorite motivational or inspirational quote and what it means to them and to their hustle. And I thank you again for making the trip and coming here. And the floor is yours.
There's a quote that was it's attributed to Harry Truman, who was president
My father's favorite president.
post FDR, and that's why I chose it. He was a Democrat. He was also president when the United States helped bring Israel into existence, right? There's a very similar quote that was on Ronald Reagan's desk, something like almost 40 years later. He was Republican. And the gist of the quote is, It's amazing what you can accomplish if you don't care who gets the credit. And, you know, it's nice to get a reach. It's nice for somebody to say thank you. It's nice for somebody to recognize you, you know, and get attributed some credit for something, right? But if you don't care about who gets credit and you just care about the end result maybe being truth, end result maybe being somebody gets helped, end result maybe being your family has enough food or a house or whatever it is to live in, right? Okay, so they gave my wife the credit. Okay, so I give God credit. Whatever the reason, whoever gets the credit, if you don't care about it, it's amazing what you can accomplish. And we spend so much time sometimes getting in our own ways, you know, and like looking and needing that credit and needing the thanks and needing the appreciation, the validation. And we don't just allow the good to flow. And for me, that's like, it's a great reminder. It's a great motivating force for just trying to stay aligned and doing good. And, you know, making the world a better place.
Love that. This has been another episode of Keep Hustling with Josh Joseph. Thank you again for being here. And remember, do well by doing good and always keep hustling.
You too.
All right, hustlers, that brings us to the end of another fantastic episode. Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode. If you have any suggestions, comments, or even just want to say hello, please feel free to reach out to us on all social media platforms. We are Keep Hustling Pod. Until next time, stay curious, stay hungry, and keep hustling.